In 1620, the Pilgrims arrived in America. During their first winter, half of them died. The rest would have died too, every single one of them. Not a single person would have survived. But one native nation saved them. They gave them food. They taught them how to grow crops. They taught them how to survive the harsh winter. That nation was the Wampanoag. And 50 years later, the descendants of the very Pilgrims they had saved cut off the head of a Wampanoag leader and placed it on a spike. For 25 years. They sold his wife and children into slavery. This is the Thanksgiving story that is rarely taught in schools, rarely shown in movies, rarely mentioned at dinner tables. But this is the truth. The Wampanoag, whose name means the people of the first light, were one of the most powerful nations in what is now New England. Their territory stretched across southeastern Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and the offshore islands of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, a landscape of dense forests, rich coastlines, and fertile agricultural land. The Wampanoag were not a single unified tribe. They were a confederacy, dozens of villages connected by shared language, shared culture, and shared political leadership. At their peak, they numbered between 50,000 and 100,000 people. They were sophisticated farmers, growing corn, beans, and squash in carefully managed fields. They were expert fishermen, harvesting the extraordinarily abundant waters of the New England coast. They were master traders, their networks reaching across hundreds of miles of the northeastern woodlands. Their political system was sophisticated and democratic. Each village had its own sachem, a leader chosen by consensus. The Grand Sachem held authority over the entire Confederacy, but that authority was always balanced by the will of the people. They had lived on this land for at least 12,000 years. And then, in 1620, a ship appeared on the horizon. In November 1620, the Mayflower arrived on the coast of Wampanoag territory. 102 English settlers, exhausted, sick, and completely unprepared for what awaited them. They had arrived too late to plant crops. The New England winter was brutal. They had no idea how to survive in this environment. By spring 1621, half of them were dead. The Wampanoag had been watching. The Grand Sachem of the Wampanoag was Massasoit. He faced an impossible decision. Just 3 years before the Pilgrims arrived, a devastating plague had swept through the Wampanoag territory. Between 1616 and 1619, an estimated 90% of the Wampanoag population had been wiped out. Entire villages disappeared. Fields that had been carefully cultivated for generations stood empty. The Wampanoag had been catastrophically weakened, and their enemies, the Narragansett nation to the west, had not been affected by the plague. The power balance had dramatically shifted against the Wampanoag. Massasoit made a strategic calculation. The English settlers, if they survived and if they could be brought into alliance, could serve as a counterbalance against the Narragansett. They had weapons the Wampanoag did not have. They had connections to a vast world beyond the ocean. Massasoit decided to help them. He sent Squanto, a Wampanoag man who had been kidnapped by English sailors years earlier, taken to England and learned to speak English, to make contact with the Pilgrims. Squanto taught the Pilgrims how to plant corn, how to fertilize fields with fish, which plants were edible and which were poisonous, where to fish and hunt, how to survive a New England winter. Without Squanto, without Massasoit, without the Wampanoag nation, every single Pilgrim would have died. In the fall of 1621, the Pilgrims held a 3-day celebration of their first successful harvest. The Wampanoag attended, bringing deer and other food that made up most of the feast.
That celebration is what Americans call the first Thanksgiving. What they don't teach in school is what happened next.
50 years of betrayal. Massasoit maintained his alliance with the English settlers for the rest of his life. He kept his word. He honored the peace. The English did not. Over the next 50 years, English settlers poured into Wampanoag territory. Town after town was established on Wampanoag land, often without permission, often over Wampanoag objection. The settlers brought diseases that continued to kill Wampanoag people. They brought pigs that destroyed Wampanoag crops. They brought legal systems that the Wampanoag did not understand and could not navigate. When Massasoit died in 1661, his son Metacom became Grand Sachem. The English called him King Philip. Metacom watched as the English continued to take more and more Wampanoag land. He watched as Wampanoag people were subjected to English laws they had never agreed to. He watched as the alliance his father had built was used to slowly strangle his people. In 1675, Metacom made a decision. He could no longer watch his people disappear. He went to war. King Philip's War, Metacom's War, lasted from 1675 to 1676. It was proportionally the deadliest war in American history. Per capita, more people died in King Philip's War than in any other conflict on American soil, including the Civil War. Metacom united multiple Native American nations against the English settlements. His forces attacked town after town across New England, burning settlements, killing settlers, pushing the English colonists to the edge of total collapse. At its peak, the English colonies were on the verge of being driven entirely out of New England. But the English had advantages that proved decisive: more weapons, more soldiers, and the support of native nations, including some Wampanoag bands who sided with the English. In August 1676, Metacom was betrayed by one of his own men. He was tracked down and killed. His body was drawn and quartered. His head was displayed on a pike in Plymouth, the same town where the first Thanksgiving had been celebrated for 25 years. His wife and son were sold into slavery in the Caribbean. The Wampanoag who survived the war were killed, enslaved, or scattered. Their villages were destroyed. Their land was taken. The nation that had saved the Pilgrims was nearly exterminated by the Pilgrims' descendants. But the Wampanoag are still here. Today, the Wampanoag Nation consists of several federally recognized tribes, including the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe on Cod Cape and the Aquina Wampanoag on Martha's Vineyard. Their language, Wampanoag, was considered extinct for over 150 years. Then, something extraordinary happened. In the 1990s, a Wampanoag woman named Jessie Little-Go Baird began working with linguists at MIT to reconstruct the language from historical documents, missionary records, legal papers, and Wampanoag writings from the 17th century. She succeeded. Today, Wampanoag is being taught to Wampanoag children. It is the first time in over 150 years that Native American children are growing up speaking a language that was considered completely extinct. Their ceremonies continue. Their connection to the land, the same land where they fed the Pilgrims in 1621, has never been broken. And every Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag hold a national day of mourning in Plymouth, Massachusetts, not to celebrate, to remember, to honor those who died, to tell the truth about what happened after the feast. The Wampanoag saved the Pilgrims. Without them, there would be no Thanksgiving, there would be no Plymouth Colony. The entire story of early America would be different. And America repaid them by nearly wiping them out. This Thanksgiving, remember the Wampanoag, remember Massasoit, remember Metacom, Remember the people of the first light who gave everything and received nothing in return. If this story moved you, share this video so more people can know the real story of the Wampanoag Nation and the real history of Thanksgiving. Follow the page for more untold stories of Native American history, and tell me in the comments which Native American tribe do you want to see next.